Hello everyone, my name is Lauren Bordeaux, and today I'll meet the candidate. We have Mr. Gray Styers here. He is running for the North Carolina Court of Appeals number 6 seat. Hello Mr. Styers, thank you for being here under these circumstances, and I'm happy that you're here.
Thank you, Ms. Bordeaux. It's a pleasure to have a chance to come here and talk to you, answer some of your questions, and talk to the voters here in the Greenville area. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right, so before we get into everything about you, let's tell the viewers about what's the Court of Appeals and why it's important to vote for the judges on the Court of Appeals.
Absolutely. The North Carolina Court of Appeals is the intermediate appellate court in the state of North Carolina. It's one level below the Supreme Court. So all decisions that come out of our trial court level here in North Carolina, out of our administrative agencies, those appeals go to the North Carolina Court of Appeals. There are 15 judges, and there are 5 on the ballot this year, and so that you vote for a seat. And again, I'm running for seat number 6. Over 90% of the cases in North Carolina, the Court of Appeals is the court of final result for those cases. The Supreme Court actually takes very few cases in North Carolina. Most of the case law written in the state of North Carolina, contract disputes, property rights, they're all established by the Court of Appeals. And so that's why it's extremely important to vote for the Court of Appeals judges, and why I think it's important to have good judges on the Court of Appeals.
Yeah, so speaking of good judges and also their qualities that they have, can you tell us a little bit about your background and education and the start of your legal career?
Certainly. I was born in North Carolina. I've lived my entire life here. I was born and raised outside of Hickory. My father was a school teacher there. My mother worked in a library. I went to public schools in Hickory. I did my undergraduate work at Wake Forest University, and then went to law school and business school, graduate business school at UNC Chapel Hill, where I received my law degree and my MBA from UNC Chapel Hill. After graduating from law school, I was so very fortunate to have worked as a law clerk for Chief Judge Sam J. Ervin III on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. That is the court in the federal court system, one level below the U.S. Supreme Court for this part of the country. And being able to work for him was such a wonderful experience, taught me so much about the role of judges, about the function of our courts, and the importance of the rule of law to our society. So having worked for Judge Ervin was a wonderful way to start my career.
Yeah, and it seems like you've had many experiences in your career too, but can you tell us, or what are some of the things that you've done in your law practice over the past 30 years?
Now, after clerking for Judge Ervin, I came back to Raleigh, where I've been a lawyer for now 30 years. I've been very fortunate to have had some great clients and great cases in every corner of our state. I started out trying cases in the courtroom and arguing appeals to our appellate courts. In fact, one of the cases I'm very proud of was my participation in the Leandro case. Some of you may remember that case. I was hired by what was the Eastern North Carolina Chamber of Commerce. A lot of your businesses here in Greenville were members of the Eastern Chamber, and they hired me to represent them and file a brief in that case arguing about how important education was to our economic development and workforce preparedness here in Greenville and in Eastern North Carolina. And the Supreme Court held in that Leandro case that every student has a right, constitutional right, to a sound basic education. I was very proud to have participated in that case. I went on and my career pivoted some. I did a lot of administrative and regulatory work. I worked in the late 90s, early 2000s, helping implement telecommunications policy to extend broadband telecommunications wireless in Eastern North Carolina. And then after 2007, the legislature passed Senate Bill 3, which established renewable energy portfolio standards. In the last 10 years, I have been representing renewable energy companies working to make North Carolina's economy cleaner and more sustainable. I'm now with a very large national law firm in which I'm their co-chair of their energy and natural resources practice group nationwide. From our office in Raleigh, the law firm is called Fox Rothschild. So I have a national practice with them. In addition, I have taught law school at UNC School of Law. I taught legal ethics and professional responsibility to law students there and helped them get trained and educated to practice lawyers the way they need to with the high professional standards. I've also been a leader in the bar associations and the profession. I was president of the Wake County Bar Association, all the attorneys in Raleigh, as well as on the Board of Governors for the North Carolina Bar Association, helping develop policy and advance the profession of lawyers statewide. So I've been very fortunate to have a varied career. I've done a lot of things over the last 30 years.
Yeah, it is very varied, and it's also very successful too. And not only have you helped other people, but you've also helped the people of Eastern North Carolina, which is awesome. So why would you want to take a pay cut and give up what you have to run for the number 6 seat?
It is unusual. Usually someone with a national law practice with a national firm doesn't run for the Court of Appeals. But I think there's really 2 reasons. The first is, I've been very fortunate to have been a North Carolinian and to have had the benefits of living in North Carolina, having gone to public schools, having gone to a great public university, to law school and business school, and really been successful in my law practice because of how strong North Carolina's economy has been over the last 30 years that I've practiced law. And we've had great leaders in our state, like Jim Hunt, like before him, Terry Sanford, that helped lay the groundwork for our state's economy to create the opportunities that I've benefited from. So here's a way for me, by running for judge, to be able to give back to the state, give back to the people of North Carolina, and help pay it forward to my children and grandchildren to provide opportunities for them like the opportunities that I've benefited from over the years. Also, I'll say that I'm worried about the direction our country's heading and worried about our court system. We seem to be such a divided society, and how do our courts bring people together and instill trust and confidence in judicial decisions? Also, it's a concern about how do the courts keep up in a rapidly changing society that we live in. Technology changes so fast, the law struggles to keep up, and I think my background qualifies me to understand those issues, and that's a concern I have. And finally, I'm concerned about the politicalization of our courts. I believe it's essential to have fair, impartial judges that are not beholden to any ideology or party, and that's a concern I have. It's a concern that I have taught my students at UNC about, concerns that I've expressed at Bar Association professional meetings, and that I see in my career over the last 30 years. And running for judge is a way for me to address some of those issues.
So you just mentioned some of the qualities that you do have, that you want to be fair and impartial, but can you tell us more qualities that would make a good judge that you think?
Well, certainly I had a great role model with Judge Irvin when I worked for him on the Fourth Circuit. And he really did instill in all of his clerks some of the values that he held when he was a judge, understanding, as I mentioned earlier, the importance of the rule of law, that we're going to treat everyone with respect and dignity. Yeah. I think judges have to do that. I think judges have to be fair and impartial and independent. I think it's important also that judges work hard. The Court of Appeals is kind of what's been called a working court because of the pure volume of cases that they handle. So I think they have to work hard. I also think good judges, especially appellate judges, have to be able to write clearly and in a way that makes it clear to everyone what the law is, and so that you're not wondering and it's not ambiguous what the court's decision is. I think finally, a judge ultimately has to be fair and understand the context of the issues that come before them. So a broad range of experiences working with people from all walks of life provides context for the issues, and also think informs good decision making as well. All those are characteristics I think that make for a good judge, and that I hope would characterize my service to the state of North Carolina on the Court of Appeals.
Yeah, so to be a little bit nitpicky, I heard you say and use the phrase rule of law. What do you mean by that?
I mean that law should be applied to everyone equally, and it should make no difference who they are when they come to the courtroom. The color of their skin, their wealth, their income, their status, their power, that should not matter. And the law should be decided, and cases should be decided not upon the personalities or characteristics of the people on the court, but rather on the principles of a fair administration of the rule of law. Above the courthouse, the Supreme Court, are the words, equal justice under law. And in a lot of our courthouses, you see a statue of Lady Justice. That statue is blindfolded not because justice is blind to the consequences of the decisions, or not because it's blind to the context of and importance of the cases, but because it makes no difference who are the parties. It makes no difference because everyone's going to be treated the same. And that's really what the rule of law means to me, and why it is so important to our justice system. Also, that statue of the Lady Justice that you see in front of our courthouses also holds a scale, and those scales are balanced. And that ensures and represents that the court should be fair to everyone, should be a level playing field. No one should have an advantage when they come before a judge and come before the courts.
Yeah, and so I'm pretty sure you can see where this is leading on to about justice and how our court system seems to be lacking that for people who are of different races, ethnicities, backgrounds, etc. So, and in the last couple of months, there's been much attention on the history of racial injustice in the criminal justice system. Also, there was a movie released in February, Just Mercy, and it was a book based on Bryan Stevenson. So, and his cases. So how do you think the court system can better ensure justice and equity for minority communities? Because obviously, as we've seen, the uprisings and the stories and the movies, that it's not there.
That's a very timely and important question.
Yeah.
And I'll start off with where I ended my last answer, which you think about the image of the balanced scales. Mm-hmm. In our history, those scales have not always been balanced. And it's important that we try to address and remedy some of the injustice that's been a part of our history, and that we do treat everyone equally and fairly in the courts. And I think as a fundamental principle, we have to recognize that injustice. Yeah. Just Mercy was a great book, and it is worth everyone reading to understand some of the injustices that have been in the past. Mm-hmm. So I think that acknowledging that and making sure that that is not characteristic of our court system today is extremely important. How do we do that is the challenge. I mean, the judges and the courts, and we don't make policy. Yeah. We don't appropriate funds. The legislature enacts statutes. We just decide disputes. So there are limits to what the judges can do in that respect. But it also underscores the importance of electing the right people to the judge positions. And I think that there's some things that judges can do. First, we all come from our backgrounds, different backgrounds, different experiences, and we all have blind spots. And you can call them implicit bias. But I think first we have to, listen to people who have come from different backgrounds, who come from different experiences. And second, we have to learn from each other. Yeah. I think that's important. And then I'll use the third L word. We have to look for those implicit biases, look for those blind spots in our decision making, so that we are aware of them and we don't let them interfere with or distort our decisions as judges. So I think that's the starting point, is to understand that we do have blind spots. We do recognize those, and we try not to allow that to affect our decision making. I think it's also important that the justice system, in its hiring and its staffing and its personnel, that is diverse and inclusive and reflects the diversity in our society. Yeah. Judges have the ability to hire law clerks. We have staff attorneys, and to be able to hire people who can inform our decisions, help us make good decisions, and that our hiring is inclusive and diverse, and that our justice system looks like the society at large is important. And finally, I'll say, to address some of these issues that have recently been highlighted, Governor Cooper issued Executive Order 145, which created a task force specifically to address injustice and discrimination in our justice system. Justice Anita Earls and Attorney General Josh Stein are chairing that task force. And again, we as judges would not be able to necessarily legislate or make policy, but I'm very interested in seeing what that task force comes out with and what their reports and findings and conclusions are. And exciting to see how they can address justice issues in our system and to improve the system so it's better than it has been historically.
For sure. And also, continuing on this topic of justice and relating it to Eastern North Carolina, Last summer, Dante Sharp, a Greenville, North Carolina native who had been wrongfully convicted and incarcerated for 25 years, was released. In your opinion, how can the court minimize wrongful convictions in North Carolina?
Well, we're fortunate to have our state actual innocence commission, innocence inquiry commission, to look into DNA evidence after the fact and see, has there been someone who has been wrongfully convicted, and try to address those injustices. I think the Duke University clinic that represented
the wrongful convictions
the wrongful conviction, those are great resources.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad we have those systems in place, but that's not the answer, because someone shouldn't be spending 25 years in prison for a crime they didn't commit.
Yeah.
I think the answer up front starts with making sure that you're electing good judges that are going to look at those cases and the processes of the trial and try to make sure that you have the right result coming out of the trial, and looking at them at the appellate level to make sure that due process has been followed and that the trials have been properly conducted. I do think also that we're making progress in that area. Just this year, May 1st, a decision by the North Carolina Supreme Court, State versus Hobbs, was the first time that the North Carolina Supreme Court actually issued an opinion providing guidance to trial courts to address racial discrimination in jury selection. It followed the U.S. Supreme Court case of Kentucky versus Batson. It's North Carolina is one of the last states in the country to actually address how to apply Batson in our state court criminal proceedings. So that's progress that has been being made in that regard as well. So again, it is tragic when there is a wrongful conviction, but one of the roles of appellate judges is to look at the record of what happened at the trial court below, make sure the process was fair, that it followed due process and followed what the law requires, to make sure that you don't have wrongful convictions like that. And that, again, underscores the importance of having good judges on the bench.
Yeah, and also why people should vote for you too. You believe in justice. And so a little bit more of a shift, a more personal question. On your website, you mention your active involvement in your church and state that your faith is at the core of who you are as a person. Do you see any conflict between strong religious faith and your obligation as a judge? Because in our Constitution, you're supposed to separate state from religion. So how do you do that, or what is your take?
Yeah. I don't see it as a conflict at all. I mean, certainly have the freedom of religion and separation of church and state guaranteed by our Constitution. However, our country and our state has had a long history of men and women of very strong faith serve in public leadership positions. And in fact, not only is it not a conflict, I think it's something that is essential for judges and public leaders to have a moral compass, to have values that guide their decisions. It's true. My Christian faith is very important to me. I have been an active member of my church wherever I've lived my entire life, and especially now that my wife is a pastor in a church in Raleigh. So it's very much a part of who we are as a family. We celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary yesterday, and she is a pastor at a church in Raleigh, and so that's very much, our world revolves around our church. But I remember when I was clerking for Judge Irvin, he had a cross stitch that hung in his office in the federal court chambers where he worked. And it was the scripture from Micah chapter 6, verse 8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? I think that is good advice for all of us, but particularly judges. That's our faith in action, and that would be, again, part of who I would be as a judge on the Court of Appeals as well.
Yeah. And so before this, though, before talking about religion and your faith, we talked a little bit about the politicization in the country. And so, as you know, that you'll be identified as a Democrat on the candidate for your or for the ballots. But what is the role of political parties in judicial elections?
Well, it's a great question, and one I've thought about a lot, because when I was president of the Wake County Bar Association, I actually wrote a column in which I was critical of having partisan election of judges. And the reason I don't like the fact that we have party labels is it doesn't reflect what judges do. When we put on a black robe and walk into a courthouse, we shouldn't be a Democratic judge or a Republican judge. We shouldn't be beholden to any ideological labels, in my opinion. There shouldn't be such thing as a conservative judge or a liberal judge. We should be fair, impartial, independent, following the rule of law, and using our very best efforts to make the right decisions in each case that comes before us. And that's almost always not an ideological party issue. So what judges do is not partisan. So, however, the legislature, which is within their authority under the Constitution, about 7-8 years ago, decided to put party labels on the ballot for judicial candidates, and I am the Democratic candidate for seat number 6. So the process by which we get elected requires us to be identified by party. I have been a Democrat my entire life, and so I'm not ashamed of that at all. But it's not who. But I've worked with Republicans in my law firms. I've represented Republican clients, and if elected, I would want to make sure that any person who came before me, regardless of their political party, regardless of whether they were Democrat or Republican, felt like I heard their arguments and I treated them fairly, and I rendered the decision not based upon any political party or ideology or special interest, but based on the law. And that's what I would be committed to do. So I am labeled on the ballot, but I do think it's important to understand that's not what I would do as a judge, and that doesn't characterize me as a judge if elected in November.
Yeah. So speaking of November and everything coming up, we want to talk. Are you the only person that's running for this seat? The only Democrat, and is there a Republican running?
Yeah. There for each. There are 3 seats on the Supreme Court that'll be on the ballot, and there are 5 seats on the North Carolina Court of Appeals.
Okay.
That will be on the ballot, and so for those 5 seats, there is. We're past the primary now, so there's one Democratic judge, one Democratic candidate, or candidate identified by the Democratic label, and one candidate's Republican. Okay. So there will be 2 candidates, each of the 2 parties running for each of the 2 seats. Awesome.
And so I'm done with asking you questions for the day. I think you've done amazing. Is there anything that you'd like to say to our viewers about voting? And I know circumstances are a little bit unusual for the time, and how you want to get your name out or anything like that?
Well, let me say that these elections are important, but they're also very far down the ballot. We have a very long ballot this year, starting with president and U.S. Senate and governor. You will have your local legislative races. And so it is far down the ballot before you reach the judges. So first, I would say it's important to vote. If you haven't registered, please do so, and make sure that you vote this November. It is how your voice is heard, it's how you make a difference, and it is part of living in a democracy. So please vote this fall. Secondly, vote for all the seats, all the races on the ballot. It's about 10 or 15%, Ms. Bordeaux, that actually will vote for the top of the ticket, but you don't even vote for judges.
Forget the rest.
So it's important that everyone vote down the ticket and vote for all of the races. Now, the challenge, and this is a challenge for me and a challenge for all the candidates running for judge, is that so many people don't know who the candidates are that are running for judge. They'll see the name on the ballot, but they'll say, well, who is that person? So that's why I'm really glad to have this opportunity to have a chance to talk to voters, for them to hear a little bit about me, my background, and my values as judge, because it's important to know who the people are on the ballot. I'd also encourage you to do your research and do your homework and find out more about the judicial candidates. My website is www.styersforjudge.com. So you will see there more information about my background, about my experience, about why I'm running. You'll see some videos like this, and have a chance to get to know me a little bit better. So again, that's www.styersforjudge.com. And I encourage you to do your homework, to learn who we are, and think about what are the values that you want your judges to have. How do you want them to decide and make decisions from the bench? And after you've done that homework, after you've done your research, I hope that you will decide to vote for me this November on Election Day, or if you vote before, because as you said, Ms. Bordeaux, a lot of folks are concerned about having to vote on Election Day, having to stand in line in this pandemic. So you can request your absentee ballots now. You can, they will be mailed to you in September, and then you'll have time to look at the ballots. It's another great opportunity to do your research, learn more about the judges, watch this on television or the videos, and then make your decision. So, and then you can mail your ballot in. Just don't mail it at the last minute. Make sure it's mailed early enough so it reaches the Board of Elections before Election Day. So whether you vote by mail, vote early voting, or vote on Election Day, I would greatly appreciate your vote. Grace Styers for Court of Appeals, seat number 6.
Awesome. And just a second, what you just said about voting, to stress the importance of it. We are living in a pandemic. Early voting starts in mid-October. Make sure you request your absentee ballots if you need it. And also when you start to early vote, and if you need help voting, you're also inclined, and you can ask somebody there to help you. If you're not able to read or see something, people are there to assist you. And I want to thank you for being here and doing this interview with us. And I'm happy that the viewers are getting to listen to you and hear how your story and your background and what you're about and how you want to help reform and help our state of North Carolina.
Well, thank you for your great questions. I appreciate it. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you. To everyone, stay safe and stay healthy and stay strong. Have a great day.